Welcome back to another episode of The Hit. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where every single week I bring you a leader from our sector to discuss some of the biggest challenges in UK housing today. Today I was delighted to be joined by Sasha Deepwell, Chief Executive Officer at Irwell Valley Homes. We talk about Sasha's development through the sector, having done a breadth of roles, and how important that's been to her becoming a Chief Executive. We talk around Irwell Valley's 50th year in business and what some of the key milestones have been for the business. We talk about their award-winning regeneration scheme at Sale West. We talk equality, diversity, inclusion, and what Sasha thinks we need to move the needle in this area. We also talk around what big role GMHP plays in creating and influencing positive change in the housing sector. I'm sure you're going to love this episode, and if you do, I'd ask that you like and subscribe. Sasha, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited for this. We had a technical issue the first time round, so fingers crossed this works fine. As is always customary on the podcast, could you just do us an introduction to yourself just to get us started?
Yeah, my name's Sasha Deepwell and I'm Chief Executive of Irwell Valley Homes. Will that do?
Yeah, that's perfect. And as I always like to start with these things, explain how you got into the sector. I mean, most people say they fell into it, but give us a bit of an insight into how you got into the sector.
Okay, well, I was doing a lot of work in the community, mainly actually around, would you believe, community drama, which was a big thing back then. Right. So engaging with young people and older people through the medium of drama.
Love it.
Yeah, it was great fun. So basically, because I'd done an English degree, and you know what you do when you've done an English degree, there's not a lot out there. I just sort of got involved in Liverpool in a lot of community drama, community initiatives. I actually got involved in an amazing school in Croxteth Community Comprehensive, which was being shut down by the local authority. So the parents occupied it to keep it open and asked if any volunteers would go and do some work with the kids, volunteer teachers. So I did drama there as well.
Amazing.
So I was really into sort of using drama for young people and older people as a way to express, you know, their emotions, talk about their lives. But through that, I actually got quite involved in sort of community or community politics. I'm not suggesting I'm a Barack Obama, by the way, but it was a great start and a great introduction to, you know, the power of communities. And then through that route, I kind of started understanding the issue of mental health and how that could really impact on people's futures and careers and life chances. And I started work in a charity called Making Space, which is based in Warrington, but works across the Northwest. Right. And they worked very much with families, with young people who were suffering severe long-term mental health problems. And I started working in the old long stay mental health hospitals. And there was an initiative called Care in the Community. And basically, we were moving people out of long stay institutions into housing in the community. And that was the link to housing. So I kind of realised how important housing was. I don't think it had clicked with me before, that to have a secure, decent, affordable, safe was really important, home in the community was vital for anyone who was struggling, whether it was through poverty, whether it was through mental health issues or anything else. Yep. And that sparked my interest in housing. And then a brilliant housing director was helping us develop a supported housing scheme. And he said, Sasha, why don't you come along to some of our training sessions? And that introduced me to the world of housing associations. Now, when you're in the charity sector, you've got no money, you've got no resources, and your job lasts 6 to 12 months if you're lucky. Yeah. So when I found out about housing associations who had 30-year business plans, who had to me, they seemed very sort of well-resourced organisations. They had computers and things like that, which the voluntary sector really didn't have. And they were doing really amazing work, working with all kinds of different organisations to provide supported housing, general needs, etc. And I got to get in on the inside through their training programs because of this housing director who let me in. And that's how I got interested in housing.
No.
So my first job was way back in, oh gosh, when was it? 1991. I worked at an organisation called CDS in Liverpool. That stands for Cooperative Development Services. That organisation is now called Plus Dane, still going. And at the time, it was an organisation that worked with housing co-ops, communities, and had its own homes. And again, it really chimed with my values coming from that community development background.
Yep.
So I had a great job there and worked my way up. I've done every single job in housing, from frontline housing management, supported housing, being a manager of all those services. And then as you go up and up, you get given more and more stuff to do. So your skill base develops. And we had a bit of an issue. We couldn't recruit to the post of development manager at CDS. So again, I got an opportunity. One of the directors said to me, look, you could do this. Go and get yourself trained up. Have a go. So I had a 2-year-old daughter at the time, but I did a very complicated postgraduate diploma, RICS, which is Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors in project management. Because at that time, I thought, oh God, you need qualifications if you're going to do something technical like development. So anyway, I did this qualification in project management and construction and became a development manager. And then I went on to become a development director. I probably spent about 10, 15 years in development. And then again, as I got to a really senior position, it was like, oh, well, do you want to become a sort of generalist? They called them managing directors in those days, which is what you'd probably call a chief operations officer now, where you were sort of over everything, you know, management, development, you name it. And then I became a deputy chief executive, and you were just over everything then. So you were doing finance, repairs, the full works. So I've probably done looked after every single part of housing now, which I think is a good thing to do if you become a chief exec.
Yeah,
it's 100%. To have worked in all those different fields and have that broad experience.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that actually. So, I mean, 30 years, I read it in the notes, and when I was doing my research, I thought, I'm glad you confirmed it was 1991 and I didn't have to say, but I think 30 years in the sector.
I did take a break. From housing. I actually spent 3 years in the private sector, which I think, again, was really important.
Of course.
Because it's good to kind of be in different sectors, to kind of check out that you really do want to be, you know, in the housing sector. And that was really interesting. I did a consultancy role with lots of different private companies and working in my own consultancy and then doing partnerships with different consultancies, you know, like Savills and lots of others actually. And that was really instructive because I got to see from the other side.
And I think that's important, like you say. And over that 30 years then, because I mean, that's a fantastic achievement to work in that. What would you say has changed, or what have been some of the fundamental changes in the sector, do you think, in that period?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say that the sector's changed in that in the early days, certainly when I started, it was very much seen as a movement, by which we meant a movement for social change. So as well as providing services and, you know, really caring about communities and residents and tenants and, you know, sort of the kind of baseline of housing. We were very much campaigning all the time around homelessness, around housing quality in the north. That's always been a massive campaigning issue. We were always trying to get more resources to spend on the old terraced housing, for example, the housing action areas, general improvement areas that had made a massive difference in the inner cities, but still needed further investment. And that was a kind of huge part of my career. So I think it was just that feeling that as well as, you know, having your social purpose within your organisation, you sort of took that onto a wider stage and tried to influence politics and policy. And I think we still do that. A lot of us feel we still do that. So whether there's been changes in that sense, you know, there's been a sort of lot of talk about people going very commercial or getting carried away with development. Well, I think development's really important because the demand for new homes we're in a housing crisis. It's immense. We've got
of course.
So for me, it's never been about numbers. It's been about need, demand, and creating homes for the future. So I think that obviously there's been huge changes in technology, and I could talk about that a lot if anyone's interested.
Yeah. We'll come on to it, definitely.
On IT. But there's been changes in technology, but some things go round and round and round. And the trouble with being in housing this long is you have to not become cynical and go, oh, I've heard this one before, because things go round and round. And
of course.
When I started, there was a massive thing about let's break the glass ceiling, and it was about getting women into senior positions, and it was massive. And there was a huge what was called then the BME housing movement, that we weren't meeting the needs of, the Black and minority ethnic communities. So there was new organisations set up, like Steve Biko in Liverpool, Arawak in Manchester, who were specifically meeting the needs of those communities and partnering with bigger organisations to help them do that. So I did a lot of that work when I was at CDS. We partnered with community-based and BME organisations. Well, those issues haven't gone away. We're still, so they come and go in waves. So I think a lot of things are very similar. And then there's been a lot of, obviously, political change. I've seen every kind of political iteration.
I bet, I was going to say, I bet you've seen a lot.
Round and round as well.
So as we look at Irwell Valley today, just give us a bit of a helicopter view of the business, for the listeners' benefit. I obviously know, but for the benefit of the listeners, what would the helicopter overview look like?
Well, Irwell Valley registered in 1973, as did an awful lot of housing associations, because it was a time when the legislation came in to allow us to register. And the associations who registered then were mainly concerned with what I've just said before, the inner city terraced housing, buying up really poor private sector homes. Well, I say buying up, often, they were compulsory purchased by the local authority and then passed on to housing associations. We got grants, which was the regime change then. If we registered as housing associations, we got grants to do up those properties. So the 70s was a great time for housing. We started with 9 homes in Salford, and then we started branching out to Bury and Bolton, because those areas had that inner city terraced housing that was in desperate need of refurbishment. And that's what we did for years. So by 1980, we had more than 1,000 terraced houses that were all refurbished, and we've got more than that actually. So we've carried on doing that for a long time. So that was how we started, and lots of other housing associations started then as well. If you sort of looked at the records, you'd find a lot started in 73. And then we sort of grew and grew. So by 91, we had about 3,000 homes. And then we started developing, and we did our first shared ownership in Bolton, in Farnworth, in 95. And I believe the first share at 50% was 20 grand. So that's not bad, is it?
Wow. I wish now.
Yeah, I know. But that was the point. A lot of who we were letting homes to in those days, and particularly the shared ownership programme, it was really targeted at people who were getting like their first step on the housing ladder. And, we do try and do that still now. We're still doing a shared ownership programme now. Our main growth, our sort of chunky growth, came from stock transfers. The Sale West residents voted to transfer 1,100 homes over. They were Manchester Council at the time, they're now in Trafford. But that was a big chunky stock transfer. And then we had another one a few years later in Tameside, in Horton Green. So that sort of helped our growth, because we're just under 8,000 homes now. So they were chunky parts of our growth, really. Very, very similar. That was a time of what was called partial stock transfers. So the whole local authorities didn't transfer, but estates where you had core stock. So, for example, Sale West was what was called Radburn Layout. So you've got your car parking away from your homes. Your houses are almost the wrong way round. Your front gardens face onto the front, and it's all
Yeah.
there's lots of design issues with the Radburn layout, which was a fantastic dream of architects at the time they were built, in the 50s, who thought, yeah, this would be a fantastic way to live. And there's some real positives, lots of green space, and I don't think they anticipated the way that cars would become, almost
absolutely, yeah,
absolute for every house and all the rest of it. Although hopefully that's starting to change again.
I think it is. Yeah, maybe they'll come back in another 100 years. You never know.
Exactly. So we grew and grew, and then basically I started at Irwell Valley in 2017, and at that stage, Irwell Valley actually stopped the development program in 2008-9. When the credit crunch happened, a lot of people paused at that point. But then others restarted. But the grant regime was pretty punitive, actually. So when I joined in 2017, I was really determined that we would get developing, we would do some really serious regeneration, because that was very much my background. When I worked at CDS and then it became Plus Dane, I did a lot of regeneration there. So Castlefields Estate in Runcorn, which was a major regen programme, was one of my sort of proudest achievements there, looking back.
I love it.
So I wanted to kind of bring that expertise and also that transformative power to communities where the estates were just configured wrong and there were problems of antisocial behaviour and all the other things that go with poor design of estates.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've got some questions on regen because there's quite a lot, but I think just one that you've just touched on. But obviously, when I was reading, big milestone for Irwell Valley this year, will be turning 50 as an organisation. Must be a proud moment to lead an organisation into that moment. But kind of, what have been some of the really big key moments? You might have already spoken about them, to be honest, with the transfers. But what are some of the other things that spring to mind in terms of good key milestones over that period?
Well, it goes back to what you said before about the changes, because Irwell Valley has held really true to its values. Right. Now, that's not so much a milestone as an achievement. I look back on the early values and the social purpose, and in fact, we made a film, and we managed to get hold of some of the people who'd worked at Irwell Valley many years ago, including two of the very early chief execs who are still around. And we've got a great film on our website, which
amazing.
And so we actually got it from the horse's mouth. What was it like then? What were the milestones? What's changed? And interestingly, we all said very similar things, because we're all really proud of the way that we've stayed true to our social purpose, the way that we've always worked with tenants and residents. We've always co-created everything we do with them. So I was able to say, in 2019, we co-created our new customer offer. And then they'd go, we did that back in whatever, So it was like, we've all contributed in a very similar way to holding true to the values. So Lynn Spriggans, who was a very early chief exec, said, I was so proud of the work we did with Bolton Young People, which is like a charity in Bolton, and we gave them their very first premises and we really supported them setting up. They're now called Backup, and we're still working with them. And I was like, we're still working with them.
Oh, that's nice. I love that.
So there was lots of continuity rather than that happened and went. It was more, we've built on this, we've built on that. So it was more like an organic kind of feeling of, rather than, this amazing thing happened in that particular year, it was more, we've kept true to our values, we've kept true to our social purpose, we've even kept the name, Irwell Valley, everybody else has got...
Yeah, I was going to say, you might be one of the only one that has, but no, to be honest, I think it's, I speak a lot about this on the podcast. I think it's important that people understand how important values and culture are in an organisation, because it can sometimes get put to the background when there's challenging backdrops and stuff in organisations. But actually, just to talk about that continuity over 50 years proves the point that culture and values are the most important thing in any business, I would say.
I mean, so much has changed. We did talk about IT, and it was really great because we had a woman who'd worked on the front line collecting rents and visiting customers. And of course, that's completely changed in terms of we don't take money, but it hasn't changed in terms of, we do go and visit customers. And, we're very much a kind of multi-channel kind of contact us organisation. We will go out to customers, we'll visit them in their homes. If people want to go completely digital on us, they can do that. We offer the full range. We're not like, oh, we've got to channel shift or whatever, because we know that we've got a real, a range of customers with different needs. And what's most important to us is they contact us. We want to hear from them.
Yeah, exactly.
What we don't want is to use technology to put them off, which is not great.
and some are pushing people down that one channel approach. I think one thing that screams out when I think of Irwell Valley as an organisation is that customer collaboration that you talk about everything being part of a joint decision-making process is really important, isn't it? And has been in your history.
It does throw up challenges, obviously, because our customers have very high expectations, but I think that's right. So, and it's really helpful because they will complain, they will come to us with things that they don't think are right, and with an expectation that we will listen and put it right. And I think that's really a good, going back to your cultural point, I think that's really important that we have that culture. I mean, our sort of plan that we have, you can call it a corporate plan, we just call it a plan, it's called Living Well. And it's really about providing those brilliant services for customers, but not just providing services, it's about engaging with them, listening, co-creating, learning from the feedback, and really genuinely going, so we got that wrong. We need to listen, put that right, change what we do, and be open about it and be a little bit vulnerable and transparent. And we're the same with colleagues. One of the things I'm proudest of, when you talked about milestones, I should have said this really, was when we changed our working model, our way of working, which we implemented in 2019, but we worked on it in 2018. But we went completely agile and flexible working based on trust. Now, that doesn't sound innovative now.
No, I was going to say, when you said 2019, I thought you might have got the date wrong and meant 2020, because everyone went a year later, didn't they?
They did. So we were so lucky when the pandemic hit, because we'd already done all that, and we'd already put teams in place, and, all those, everyone had a laptop. We weren't on that sort of, oh my God, where do we get laptops from?
I bet. Yeah.
And everybody was used to working in that agile, flexible way. But what was innovative wasn't the tech side of it or that. It was more that it was a trust-based system. So we got rid of all those sort of monitoring people's hours and, all that stuff, and said to people that we trust you. We know you want to do the best job for customers. And, my philosophy and my culture is 99.999% of colleagues behave brilliantly, respect the culture, etc. So I build around them. I don't build around, and we do get them, the odd person who might abuse the system or whatever. And, we will deal with that through, disciplinaries and other means. But I would rather build the whole culture on the vast majority of people who are fantastic.
Of course. And I think some people, and what works for an organisation is different case by case. But I think some people build it on the 1% rather than the 99%. But and you've got to build it the other way around. The one thing that I was going to ask, because you mentioned it about customer expectations being high, do you think that's changed a lot? Because I feel that, from our business perspective, I think everyone's changed their expectations on speed of delivery of everything. Like the world we live in now is you order something today, it comes tomorrow, whereas back in the day it was 6-7 days. Do you think that's also changed from a customer perspective? Everything has to be right now, or how's that changed over the last 5 or 10 years with technology?
I don't think I don't see it quite like that. Okay. I think technology can be a total pain, and it's colleagues as well as customers and stakeholders. The kind of person who thinks that it's okay to send you an email and expect a reply in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm like, no.
It's not going to happen. Yeah.
It's, for me, I'm much more interested in prioritization. So, if it's something that's urgent, but really, really important, fine, we'll do that first.
Yeah.
But if it's just, somebody saying, I need this now, unless there's a really good reason, and I'm talking about colleagues here as well.
Yeah, of course.
What we find with customers is they are far more interested in getting things right first time than rushing to a job.
Okay.
And they're far more interested in us making an appointment and keeping it to their and our convenience than getting out quickly. Unless, of course, it's urgent. That's different.
Course,
emergency, you want them out now. And, that's the way we've worked our system. If it's not an emergency, wouldn't it be better that you've got the right equipment, the right tools, the right person going out to the customer
and it's done properly. Yeah.
At the time that they say is convenient to them because of their own work or family or other issues. To me, that's how a service should be run.
We try and make everything quick and then do it twice. We might as well just do it properly the first time, which is par for the course. One achievement I picked out, and it's a recent one, but was Sale West, award-winning development regen scheme at the Northern Housing Awards. Tell us a bit about the project, and more importantly, I suppose, is how much of a positive impact has it had on that community, would you say?
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's award-winning because there's not much choice at the moment, and that's not to downplay what we're doing.
Yeah, of course.
But, there's no funding for regeneration. So if you are doing it, then you're a regen warrior like me. And basically what you're doing is pulling together odd bits of money from wherever you can get it.
Yeah.
So we were very lucky we weren't lucky. We worked really hard to get funding for Sale West through Homes England. They were the first funders, and I will ever be grateful to them for that, for the new build. And then working with Trafford Council, we were able to get some DLUC money, some levelling up funds. Not much, just under £1 million, but it's all good. And that's allowed us to do some environmental improvements that the Homes England money wouldn't have covered. But most of the money has been put in by Irwell Valley. And it's a £50 million regeneration scheme, start to finish. And, it will transform the estate. But so far, it's really early days. So your question on what difference has it made to residents, it's made a difference to some individual residents.
Yeah, of course.
And, we've got Jaden, who was our local guy who dropped out of school and became an apprentice. And that's a double win for us, because not only did he get work through the Regen programme, he actually got his GCSEs through a youth engagement charity that we funded through the Irwell Valley Foundation. Mm-hmm. That is another milestone, actually, that I should have mentioned. That was set up in 2009, and it's a fantastic legacy because it's a huge pot of money, 2 million, that generates interest every year.
Right.
In perpetuity, that we can, and on a good year, that it can go up and down depending on the interest rates, but it gives us a lovely chunk of money to be able to invest in community projects and local charities. So Jaden benefited to get his GCSEs, and he got his apprenticeship. He's now working on an estate that he lives in and is now very proud of. So for that particular resident, massive change. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
There's another resident who we supported through the foundation again to launch her own wood business, wood carving, making stuff out of wood. And then we could commission her through the DLUC money to do all kinds of bird and bat boxes and stuff around the estate. But there's lots of individual residents. The residents who've got the new homes, because we're on court, we're going to do just under 300 new homes, and we've already delivered 50 of them. And so some new residents have moved in. We were able to make the first phase, which is about 89 homes, all social housing. So really cheap rents, 60% less than market, which is amazing because we got really good grant levels, but also it was pre this inflationary awful situation that we're in with costs. But anyway, if you speak to some of those residents, they've come from terrible situations, homelessness, severe overcrowding. So we've transformed their lives, that is for sure. So that's, quite a few people. For the existing residents on the estate, what they've benefited from most so far has been some of the new play areas, some of the new environmental improvements, but also we've invested in their homes. And this is where Irwell Valley's huge investment comes in: new roofs, new kitchens, new bathrooms. And we've got a rolling programme to go right across the estate with those improvements. Some people are still waiting, so when's mine going to happen? But if you're going to look at sort of big measures, which regeneration programs should, I think we've got a long way to go, and they are really slow to improve. If you're talking about reductions in antisocial behaviour, increases in life chances through education, reaching out to people not in employment and education, all those sort of really sort of big changes that you want to make, then it's going to take a long time. But I feel like we're on a really good upwards trajectory there, and we are measuring those things. But we're only a couple of years in, so not a lot will have happened yet.
No, and where do you sit on? Because when you said there wasn't funding, there is now, isn't there? Is the Homes England have changed the grant level, haven't they, for regen schemes? I saw in the press, or they're going to allow companies to get funding for regeneration, not just new build now. Is that right?
You tell me. I don't want to be controversial, but there's been a lot of announcements, and I'm waiting.
I read something recently that just said that they might start using the funding for regen, and if that is the case, I'm well behind that, because I think there's not enough money available for it.
Well, to be positive, Homes England have been incredibly supportive, as I said before.
Good.
But they know that their funding regime has not actually supported us in the way that it should. Yeah. So we're in discussions with them at the moment over how they could support us better. And I'm really hopeful that they will going forward, but we haven't got detail of that yet. I should also give a big shout out to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority through the Housing Investment Programme, who have been incredibly supportive with Brownfield Land Fund as well. So that's made a massive difference, and will continue to make a massive difference, not just in Sale West, in other developments that we do as well, and that others are doing across Greater Manchester.
Amazing.
So I think there's some really positive moves, and I love working in Greater Manchester from that point of view. You've got that strategic join up and support.
Yeah, you do, and there needs to be more on regen, because I'm all for new development, and I think it's really important. But I also think we can make better of what we already have as well. And when you look at all the unusable pieces of land and sites that we have, there's so much that can be done. As we move on, I know this is massive in your agenda, and I wanted to make sure we talk about it quite a lot. When we look at kind of EDI and making sure we're tackling, inequality in the workplace, you've done loads. You've been chair of DICE. You've worked a lot with the GMHP in terms of trying to get some movement on this. But can you just tell us a bit of the outcomes of some of the stuff and work that you've done to this point? And I suppose as a broader point, there's still a lot to do, isn't there? And we're still back in this cycle. You said you've been through quite a number of cycles. I think I've been through 3, and I've only been in my career for 14 years. So I'm sure we'll be back here in 5 years. But just give us a bit of an overview of where you think we're at, and also what some of the work you've already done has achieved and the outcomes.
Okay. This is such a massive question. And I think for me, it's a very personal question, because I think from going way back, I've been doing stuff on this agenda for 40 years, pre-housing, and, just the inequalities that, continue to exist. And, every now and then there's something that happens that brings it to the forefront again, and, everyone gets quite exercised about it. But the pandemic was interesting, because there was a lot of work done in Greater Manchester on looking at inequalities and the impacts. And I think health had a huge wake-up call And they're doing an awful lot around how to tackle inequalities that are so evident in the health system. But they're there in housing as well, as we know. When I came into Greater Manchester, I said, oh, what are we doing on equalities? There was nothing. So I set up the DICE group, which is with the housing providers. And then not long after, Andy Burnham commissioned a sort of massive report into inequalities in Greater Manchester. He had an inequalities commission that then reported and said, you've got an awful lot to do across every aspect.
Yeah.
And they set up a tackling inequalities board, which I'm on for the housing providers, but it's fantastic. It brings together everyone from police, health, private sector, voluntary sector, all in one place under the mayor to look at, okay, what are we all doing? And keeping that spotlight is so important because it is creating initiatives, it is making change happen very small and slow. But, you know, that's the way this sort of change happens. It doesn't happen in one go. And you've also got to be, you have to really watch out for reactionary issues. So if you look at things globally, and they can happen here as well, you know, you look at Afghanistan and what happened there, where basically you had the highest number of women of anywhere in a parliament. You had highest number of women in education. And then, of course, Taliban come in and it's all gone overnight. And I'm just using that as an example because, you know, that is what happens with rights under equalities. You know, there is a fundamental deep inequality in the whole world, actually, on a whole range of issues, which means that if you don't keep fighting for rights and you don't keep pushing things forward and you don't keep alert to when things get taken away, then, you know, what's going to happen. And for me, it's very personal. You know, my dad's family were all lost in the Holocaust. So there's a lot of issues there for me politically. From my own perspective, you know, I'm a lesbian, I have a black daughter, you know, I'm very focused in all those issues and all those inequalities. I know how the education system, you know, discriminates against, you know, Black people essentially and sort of categorizes them. And you've got, you know, there's so much.
There really is.
Higher education. So, you know, on every level, there's discrimination. One of the issues that we haven't done very well on as a housing sector, which is incredible to think about, is disability. When every housing provider would say that an awful lot of our residents have got disabilities,
agreed.
Whether it's mental health, physical health, whatever, never mind colleagues as well. And yet we're really poor at understanding that, creating the data. And even in my own organisation, I'll be the first to admit that customers with disabilities are the least satisfied. Now, why is that? We're not listening enough. We're not providing good enough services. We're not taking their needs into account. So there's so much more to do on every level.
Yep.
So what I did with DICE was I said, right, okay, let's just be honest. Let's be open. You know, none of us are perfect. We've all got stuff to learn. We can all improve together. Let's get a baseline report together. This was we started it in 2018-19. We published in 2020. There was lots of delays getting people engaged. But what we did, we pulled together lots of baseline data, but not just data. We pulled together, so what are you doing about it? What initiatives you've got? What improvements are you trying to make? And then we said, right, we'll repeat this to see if we've made changes. So we repeated it again 2 years later. And good news was there have been some improvements, but only in very, very the easiest to fix areas. But again, that's understandable. So we've got better representation from BME people on boards. Great. But that's because turnover on boards is quick. And it was, you know, there's been a lot of work to make that happen. So that's great. But in terms of leadership positions, no, which is why the Boost programme that you mentioned before exists. It's to try and challenge leadership, so people like me and my boards, as to, you know, why is it that, you know, your BME staff are not progressing? What barriers are you putting in their place? You know, why is, you know, it's turning the problem on its head. It isn't.
It really is.
Isn't with those individuals. The problem is with you as an organisation, what you're doing to fix it. So it's a lovely reverse mentoring, challenging type of program boost, as well as giving really good mentoring and support to the people.
It's amazing. It's amazing. We wrote, and again, this just shows the spotlight of this. We wrote a BME recruitment strategy for a housing association, National Housing Association, during the lockdown. And what came out of that was actually not making it tokenistic in any way, shape or form, but actually there was so many BME members of their team that didn't feel, at that point anyway, that they could progress. Not because necessarily what the organisation did. It came down to confidence. When we did a research project, it came down to the fact that those employees didn't feel confident enough to put their name into the pool of candidates to go and apply for a role. That was it. And they did like a guaranteed interview scheme, and it really worked.
Absolutely.
But then what I would say is,
why is that confidence low? And
I don't know.
This is what I'm questioning really. But then if you go back to whole life experience, what people were told at school, that sort of dampening down, that sort of prejudice that's existed throughout their lives, the lack of role models, and the kind of the negative voices and all the rest of it, then no wonder confidence is dampened. It's the same with women, actually. There's been loads of studies done of roles descriptions, and a lot of men will go, oh, I can do a bit of that, bit of that,
bit of that. I was going to say, yeah.
And women will go, oh gosh, I haven't got a degree in such and such, or a further whatever, and I've got no experience in this, and then they don't apply. And, that goes back to me thinking I had to do a RICS postgraduate diploma in project management.
Exactly that.
Development. No, I didn't.
No.
But, that was my own sort of, it's really technical. I need to get this qualification. When I'd done the qualification, I realised, it's useful to have it. But no, I didn't really need that. I could have learned on the job. I could have learned through mentoring. It was just, again, that lack of confidence.
Yeah, well, we were recruiting recently a non-executive director, and we reached out as usual to all the usual people. And one candidate said to me, "Do you know what? I've had 50 times more approaches since the George Floyd situation because I identify as black." And I think that that's really wrong. I think that people have now gone out and gone the other way with it. And actually, I think what this candidate was saying was, I just want it to be for the right reasons why we're people want to recruit me, not because of the colour of my skin. And I think we've got an educational piece on this around schools and younger, like we've got to get to the root of the cause problem, haven't we? Because it's existed for centuries and centuries and centuries, and it's all good and well having a nice glossy brochure that says what you're going to do, but actually we've got to get to the systemic behaviours of our organisations and fix it, I think.
Absolutely.
Across it all. And I saw that you talked to Inside Housing recently about making the sector more attractive as well. What was the sort of...
I'm really worried about this, we've had such a bashing in the media, and I'm not saying some of it isn't deserved, because absolutely we should set really high standards in our properties. We should tackle damp and mould, we should do things right. Of course we should. And we should be humble when we get it wrong. I think because of the sort of media profile now, we're sort of being presented as a really unattractive sector. And in fact, there are some, why would you want to work in social housing? You could say the same actually for social work. You could say the same for NHS. You could say the same, for social care. There's a lot of jobs now that aren't necessarily the best paid. However, they're very secure jobs, loads of career development, promotion, supportive opportunities, decent pensions and benefits. And certainly in my organisation, we get loads of positive feedback from colleagues about the flexibilities. And in fact, that was the reason we did it. We did it not because we knew there was a pandemic coming. We did it because it was about people's work-life balance and, I want people to really enjoy their jobs. We've got enough problems to deal with out there that you've got to create a culture where work is a little bit fun, but certainly very supportive and friendly, and you can be your own self at work. So I think housing is a really attractive career. And I think there's so many opportunities to expand and develop and, you know, and it is really rewarding, believe it or not. Again, going back to, working for the 99%, lots and lots of customers are so happy with, what they're provided with and the service we give them, the quality of their home. We would like the homes to be a lot better. And, going back to our purpose, I really think we need to campaign now for investment in existing homes. They're very old now. The last big investment programs, when I started talking about the 70s, we stopped getting money to invest in our own homes from government years ago. Stock transfers got money, but again, that's years ago. But traditional housing associations investing in our old terraced homes and our old flat blocks and whatever, we stopped getting money years ago. The housing corporation, as it was, now Homes England, used to give us grants for that because they realised that if you want to keep rents low, you've got to get grants to do the major investment that's required in your homes. At the moment, we are in a bit, I don't want to start moaning about rent levels and whatever's, but, there is a bit of a problem for the sector at the moment. Our business plans are not looking rosy. What we want to do and what our customers want us to do, quite rightly, is green our homes. We've got to get to zero carbon.
Exactly.
I have proved categorically on Sale West that it's incredibly expensive to retrofit. As if we didn't know. We did a retrofit pilot to see, wouldn't it be great if we could retrofit all the homes? I wish.
Yeah, I know. I mean, staying on the attraction of the sector as well, like the one thing that we do I love this sector. Like I've been in it all my career. I love the sector. I would never change it. Yeah. I think we beat ourselves up all the time about all the things we get wrong, but we don't celebrate how good we do things and how great our customer service can be and how well we look after our residents and tenants. The other thing is as an employee in this sector, it's fulfilling. You're actually the social purpose, the value you're adding, all the other things. And we did a study with loads and loads of college and university graduates, trainees, and nobody in that poll came out with money as the top pillar. Like everyone was planet, giving back, community, and money was like right down the list. If I'd have done that 15 years ago, money, progression, all that would have come top of the charts. And now people want something different. They love sustainability. They love the planet stuff. So, and we can offer all of that. The problem is, and I say it every week, I must say it every week, I'm getting boring, that we've got to go and meet these people on different channels, not put our adverts in Inside Housing and get the same people. I'm not saying there's a place for that, but people aren't coming to look at Irwell Valley's website for a job unless you're in the sector. So how do we get people from other sectors? Go and meet them on their own channels, Twitter, Instagram, I don't know, TikTok. My daughter's TikTok mad at the moment. But how do we get people in a different place?
I had a go. I don't know if you've seen, I did a podcast called Housing People. But the trouble is, it's on the Inside Housing platform. So I don't know.
No, that's fine.
But, that's a podcast where we just interviewed some great people, diverse people in housing, myself and Olu from Altair. Because, it came back because we've been judging some awards, Housing Heroes, Women in Housing, and we found all these amazing stories of people, their career journey into housing and then how much they loved housing and what they were doing.
Yeah.
But we want to broadcast this because it's fantastic.
The Inside Housing thing's really important, but we've got to go broader.
We've got to go wider.
We've got to go wider. We have to.
But I would love for recruitment consultants to kind of advise us on how we do reach that wider audience.
I think so.
We did the jobs fair at the CIH conference where we reached out to local FE colleges, sixth forms, etc., and tried to reach people across GM to come and apply for jobs in housing. But we've got to do a lot more of that. It's just having the resource and how do we reach those young people? I wish we could. And it's not just young people, just generally we've got to reach out, haven't we?
Yeah, but we're going to miss another generation if we don't start talking about it more. We're going to miss another set of trainees that are going to go to tech and to all these other sectors, when really our sector is just as important, just as it can be so important. A couple of last things for me. The big one was around, and I know we talked about this off camera, just around integral core and social purpose and how big of a role it plays in creating the right culture. And how big culture plays a role in all of those things within Irwell Valley, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting. And going back to my sort of private sector experience, I'm not saying private sector don't care about customers. They do drastically, and about their impact on the environment and so on. But ultimately, their underlying driver is commercial success. So generating profit, of course it is. And I do find it endlessly refreshing, as do I meet all new starters. We have like a little get together and we all talk about how we got into housing and what we think and so on. And I always get that same response from people who've come from the private sector, whether it's, a plumber or it could be anyone really, coming into the organisation. And they will always say that they love the fact that it's not all about just earning money. And they're all very conscious. I think we forget this, that people who work in the private sector are conscious they're creating money, not for themselves. They're creating money for the shareholders or whoever's giving money. Whereas they appreciate that in our sector, the money you're creating is being invested back in homes, in services, and in colleagues really. So I think that there's a lot of appreciation of that goes on really. And I've completely forgotten what you were asking me.
No, just how much of an important role does creating the right culture play to make?
Culture, yeah. No, really, I do think the social purpose is important, but I also think it's important to look after colleagues, because we do a lot about the impact we make for customers and in communities, and we've got some great videos and examples of that. But at the same time, we've got to care about colleagues as well and their well-being. And I'm really conscious about that. The cost of living crisis doesn't just affect our customers, affecting colleagues as well. So, we do try and do our best, pay as well as we can within the constraints, of what we can afford. But also it's more about the added benefits that we can give people, help them develop their career, support them with well-being and all that kind of stuff as well. Now, that is hugely crucial because you do hear reports, actually particularly more from the charitable sector, where they are very purpose-driven, but maybe there isn't that same balance of emphasis on the well-being of colleagues. And certainly because I chair the Centre for Women's Justice, we're a very small charity. And we're always really conscious about the problem of burnout and overwork and, underpay or not even so much pay, but not being able to support colleagues effectively who are dealing with really tough situations. And I'm really concerned about that with our frontline actually in Irwell Valley at the moment. It's really tough out there. Those stresses and strains of cost of living are playing out in increases in antisocial behaviour and all sorts of other stresses and strains on the front line.
Yeah.
So we've got to have that backup for colleagues, and that's got to be part of your culture, as much as your social purpose and wanting to make a difference.
No, it's a really good point. And there's definitely a tension at the moment, isn't there, in society, just in terms of just the general mood of, cost of living. Yeah. I don't think there's ever been a more difficult time to be a chief exec at the moment of a social housing provider. I just don't. How important a role does GMHP play in creating an influence in the sector, would you say? And how much more would you like to see it do?
I don't know about influencing the sector. It's more about collaborating across Greater Manchester. That's where the huge benefits come. So the work that DICE do, that's involved 23 housing organisations. Some of them are huge. You've got the likes of Riverside in there. We've got L&Q now through Trafford Housing Trust. Some of them are really tiny and local, and lots of medium-sized players. like ourselves. So you've got an influence bigger than just GM, but within GM, it really is making a difference. I mean, I mentioned cost of living before, but all the work that we're collaborating on improving what we do on financial inclusion, illegal money lending, all sorts of really practical collaborations that you don't want to be like replicating every organization doing it. In a way, it's kind of almost an alternative to merger. So you get those economies of scale and only doing things once, but you keep your own identity, culture, keep close to customers, all the rest of the benefits of being the scale of an organization like Irwell Valley. But then I get the benefits of that wider collaboration. So I think we put a lot of work in, but then we get a lot of benefits back and influence as well. We have regular meetings with the mayor, with all the leaders of the local authorities, political leaders, chief execs, so on, leaders of place or whatever they call their, sort of region type people.
Yeah.
So it's just it's a good place to make sure that things happen well locally. And, recent successes, we have got a fund from DLUC through GMCA, which is going to be distributed to housing providers to try and tackle some of the worst impacts of damp and mould on properties. And that's, a really good grant scheme that's innovative, unique, and comes through that collaborative working.
Yeah, I agree. And I honestly think it's the one thing that I love most about the sector is no one's fighting against each other. It's not like the private sector where everyone's trying to get one up on their peers. We're all competitive as nature, but everyone wants everyone to win at the same time. If the sector wins, we all win individually and ultimately the residents win. And I think that's most important.
Couldn't put it better myself.
Yeah, but it's lovely though. Like no one's actually trying to one up anyone or... we're all trying to learn from each other's wins and failures, aren't we, at the same time? Yeah. But and the final thing for me, and I always like to end here, is just what are you excited about for you personally? What are you excited about for Irwell Valley in the future? What are you looking forward to?
Okay, I love seeing people come up through the ranks and succeed. And, I've got 2 new exec directors who've done just that. So I'm really excited for those 2. One started a few months ago, one's just started. So Keris Esplin and Scott Murray, who, are my 2 new exec directors, I am so excited for them because, they've worked their way up through the ranks in housing. This is a great opportunity for them. They've got great future careers and I can't wait to see what they do with those services. So that's really lovely. And I love to see people succeed. I've done a lot of mentoring in my time. I'm a huge believer in mentoring and coaching. So seeing people come into the sector, develop, grow and succeed is amazing. But I have a lot of concerns for the sector. We're in danger of becoming residualised and we've got to fight back. So all the things we've talked about, how important the sector is, what we can do to tackle homelessness, to meet housing needs of the future, to be, not only a great place to work, but also a great place to live for residents, provide real high quality homes at fantastic prices, because, we are still the most affordable option for anyone looking for housing, and we offer the best service of anyone looking for a housing service. I really believe that. So I think if we continue to work with residents, to continue to improve, the future is exciting, but we've got to fight and promote ourselves a lot better.
Yeah, what a lovely way to finish. I think I've loved having. I think we're going to have to rerun this and do another one in the future because there still feels like there's a lot we could talk about here. But honestly, what an unbelievable journey, and I'm really excited for kind of. The sector's in a tough time at the moment, but I do believe that kind of from what you've said here, you're still trying to, it's quite easy to forget about all the other stuff that we should be doing, EDI and equality and all this. And it sounds like even though there's challenges in business, you're still trying to drive yourself forward to achieve stuff in those areas, which is really, really good to see. And I think, I'm excited to see where Irwell Valley go in the next 50 years.
Me too.
Thank you for coming on.
I won't be around for the next 50.
You never know. Never say never. But thank you so much for your time and giving it up. And I can't wait to get this out.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Hip. If you'd like to hear more from us, please be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. We are also running a 30-minute clinic free of charge to any clients that want to recruit in a more inclusive way. For more information, please reach out to us on our website, andersonjames.com.